Well, how do you deal with some of the mindsets? Because in so many cases, leaders are under a lot of pressure, right? Under a lot of pressure to deliver. They are expected to produce certain results. And what you're describing to me sounds completely logical. Yet I know that when we are in the workplace, that ideal environment, sometimes it may be difficult to create. So what would you say would be like one of the key things that leaders can do to address that?
Yeah. So I'm going to start by saying there's a thing in Silicon Valley right now, which is very popular, and that is embracing failure and recognizing failure and celebrating failure. And the reason I bring this up is that oftentimes the answer to a question like the one that you just asked is you have to celebrate failure and you have to allow people to take risks. And this is where I get to be a little bit counter to the overall Silicon Valley culture and say that for me and my teams, failure is never a goal. Mm-hmm. And so the thing that I try to get my teams to focus on is learning. Right. So success is the goal. Delivering very quickly new products and new services that people will love is the goal. And we want to get to that as quickly as possible with as little failure as possible. Right. So I don't give out failure awards. I don't give out, failure recognition. I don't give out failure incentives or anything like that. What I say is, if you have done something and you have been met with a surprise, right? Oftentimes that surprise is a negative surprise, right? Because you will have not gotten the results that you expected, right? You expect to get a good result and you got a bad result. As long as the teams then go back and analyze what went wrong, what happened, and that analysis leads to a key learning about our customer or a key learning about the approach that we took, that we can then ladder into a new way of doing things that will more likely to get us a successful outcome to either that problem or to a different problem. That is what we reward, right? So we as leaders can be highly tolerant of people getting surprises from their work products, as long as those surprises lead them to a deeper analysis and a deeper understanding of what they should do next. As long as those surprises lead to learning, that they will then result in a positive and successful outcome, right? So that is one thing that really, in terms of you asked about the mindset. So the mindset that we can instill and ingrain in our teams is one in which they are constantly trying and learning. Now they try to succeed. They don't try to fail. They try to succeed. But often if they don't, if they learn and then they succeed, that can be rewarded as equally or sometimes more, because that learning can actually lead to a bigger success than what they had initially been hoping for.
Right. And I think what you're saying is, let's not go with a low common denominator of let's celebrate the failure. What you're saying, let's give people credit when they have successively tried. And even if they had not succeeded, at least we've learned as an organization from it. And we can then, go from that place to the next one rather than go back to zero.
That's right. And the people who have tried and not succeeded need to take responsibility for that learning. That's also the other thing. I think that accountability and responsibility is very important. And this is where I think a lot of leaders get it wrong, which is they think accountability means that you punish people for trying things and not succeeding. And what I would say is, as a leader, can you take the approach, if you don't believe in rewarding failure, right, and you really don't have enough space in your budget to allow people to experiment a lot and fail,
right?
Can you at least reward the people who are taking accountability for their failures, bringing you new learnings that resulted from it, and then giving you new approaches,
right,
that will be successful,
right?
Right. Now, it does take patience on the employee's end, right, to do that, because it takes time to learn from your failure. It takes putting your ego aside. It takes a whole bunch of things that a lot of people naturally don't do. They often try to hide from the failure. They try to run away from the failure. But can you actually ask them to take responsibility for it in a positive way, unpack it so that we can learn, and then come up with a recommendation based on that learning about what does success look like given the surprise that you've gotten out of the last thing that you've tried.
So it sounds to me like the mindset shift has to happen on all levels, from the employee to the supervisor to the management team, right? So that everybody knows that this new approach is actually embraced by the organizational culture.
Yep.
And that it will be rewarded accordingly.
That's right. And it starts with leadership.
That's right.
I really believe it always starts with leadership, right? People respond to, what their leaders do, how their leaders behave, and what they are rewarded and incentivized to do, to be quite honest, right? So, oftentimes I hear things like, oh, I'm from so-and-so country, and therefore we have a culture without risk-taking. And I've worked all over the world. I've worked in Asia. I've worked in, Moscow. I've worked in France. I've worked in England. I've worked in many places in the United States. And in each one of those places, there are organizations still within the same country, still with the same cultural mindset, that are able, right, to get people to be, more risk-taking, or, have more innovative products and services coming out of that particular company. And so, and the reason why is because the leadership has thought about their organizational culture in a very precise way. And they've actually grappled with what do we need to do to actually structure our organization in a way that will get us the type of culture that we want, and therefore the types of business outcomes that we want. Okay. And so it starts with the leadership asking themselves that question, and then the leaders need to model that behavior. Mm-hmm. So it's not just about saying things, it's about doing them and behaving that same way. And the CEO and their direct reports behaving in exactly the same way and holding themselves accountable in the exact same way that they want their managers to hold the frontline employees accountable, and starting to model that behavior and consistently communicating, not just through words, but through actions, the type of culture that they want to build. And regardless of what country you're in, I have seen that work.
Right.